Call to order the meeting for the Planning and Zoning Commission for August 10th, 2020. Roll call, please.
Tony Gokenbach.
Here.
Mark Hydrich.
Here.
Mark Fleesner. Mark Piontek.
Here.
Tom Holtmar.
Here.
Sandy Lucy. John Borgman.
Here.
Chuck Watson.
Here.
Samantha Wacker. Carolyn Witt. Sal Maniaci.
Here.
Please rise for a pledge of allegiance. First item on the agenda is the minutes, approval of the minutes from the June 8th, 2020 meeting. I'll entertain a motion if you've had a chance to review those.
Make a motion.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Moving on to item number 3, file number 200801. Applicant is requesting approval of a rezoning at 15 and 21 East 2nd Street from R3 multifamily to C3 central commercial.
And I'll actually do the next one in the same presentation.
Item number 4, file number 200802. Applicant is requesting approval of a preliminary plat for Main Street Development Plat 1.
All right.
Sal.
Yeah, thank you. So this rezoning and preliminary plat is the next phase of the Front Street development. It's the TIF that was approved in February 2017. The rezoning are these two southern parcels at the corner of 2nd and Market here. This is the old schoolhouse at 21, and at 15, this is an existing vacation rental. You can see the existing zoning here. So the parcel to the north on Main and Market is already zoned C3, which is our downtown district that allows for the mixed use and zero lot line. They needed, I think, a little bit of land on this lot here. You'll see on the plat. And then just to clean it up, so they asked to rezone this southern lot first, as 21 East 2nd, and rather than just leave one lot left to be boxed out and not part of the zone district, the applicant actually reached out to us and said if we would go to that neighbor, would it be okay if we included them zoning since it's contingent? We said absolutely, we would actually prefer that if the neighbor's on board, and they were. And that use, that vacation rental, is actually a non-conforming use that is permitted in the C3. So actually rezoning it to C3 brings it into conformance and gets it back in conformance with the code. So we are recommending approval of the rezoning of these two blocks to the C3. It'll be uniform for the entire block then to be in this downtown district. And then I'll move on to the plat. Pretty straightforward compared especially to what we've been seeing with the Front Street TIF. It'll be 3 individual townhomes lots that face Main Street on the corner of Main and Market. There is a 20-foot no parking ingress-egress easement that goes across the back of all 3 lots. It is not required to be 26 feet as they on a corner lot here, and it's less than 150 feet. They have 2 fire lanes that they can reach around the building. So they don't need the fire lane in the back, but they do have the no parking there so owners can get in and out of their garage. In this C3 district, there are no minimum lot sizes and no setbacks, and so with them building straight up to the property line on the front and side yards, there's no issue there. They will obviously have to be, during the building code process, the fire rated walls and everything to make sure that there's no issues in between structures. But other than that, we recommend approval of this application as well for the next phase of the Front Street TIF.
Any questions or comments from board?
I have a question.
Yes.
Andy, this is yours? I cannot talk under. Do you have any plans for the historic old house?
Yeah, I want to turn it into a house.
Okay. Well, see, it's very important to have a historic person on here to
We've always said that.
ask those important questions. Thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to say something about this? If not, I'll entertain a motion on item number 3 first, the going from R3 to C3.
I motion we approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm not opposed,
but I'm abstaining from voting.
Okay. No opposed? So moved. And then item number 4, file number 200802, is there any further discussion? Questions, comments by anyone? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
All right, and both of those will be on Monday, the 17th for approval. And I should have mentioned that the final plat, since all public utilities are already there, we will not require any escrow approval. So the final plat will go with the preliminary plat next week. So,
All right, moving on to item number 5, file number 200803. Applicant is requesting approval of a rezoning of 132 South Old Pottery Road.
all right.
Sal?
Yeah, so this one has, it seems a little bit more complicated. It was a lot easier on the agenda just to say 132 South Pottery Road because there's a couple different things going on here. But if you remember about a year ago, this property, the Camp Schrader piece, was annexed in. The southern piece, I think actually part of it at the north here was annexed in as well. And it was brought in as R3 multifamily residential. So I'll kind of get into that first. You can see the existing zoning. All of this is already multifamily in this light blue. Multifamily residential. This red is commercial, C2 general commercial. There are these 2 small parcels that are included that are R1A, single family residential, not really developable. They're landlocked, but they were originally zoned R1A. And again, this piece over here, it gets to South Pottery Road. And then, and it's kind of throwing you off here because normally it's white, our mapping changed, but this turquoise color is actually outside the city limits. So everything else is inside the city limits. You can see now that Meadow Lake has been annexed, it's the R1A single family residential. So when this first got annexed in, they annexed it in as the lots were as they are today. You can see it's kind of piecemealed together. Some of them are landlocked. Some don't have great access. There's about 8 parcels in total. And we did know, talking to the applicant when they first brought it in, eventually they're going to have to come back in and replat this to get it, laid out to more appropriate level so it actually is ready for development. And so they're getting to that point where they're ready, getting closer to development and needed to not only change the boundary lines and consolidate them into more, concise pieces, but also amend that zoning boundary. So, we pretty much knew the intention that this C2 between R3 wasn't permanent here. Once they rezoned, it was going to be shifted to a certain point. So what they're asking for tonight is actually going to be 3 different rezonings. And we think they actually are creating pretty good buffers. It's we think it's a decent, without seeing a site plan, a decent plan for the surrounding area. And what they're essentially changing to, they're going to have 3 changes. So this will be more or less, once it's consolidated, the lots, the new size. So this light blue is the multifamily. So the piece here to the north, about 20, I think it's, when it's all said and done, it's about 20 acres, but there's a piece to the north, as you can see, is currently commercial. It'll go to multifamily, and that is actually adjacent to existing single family. So, and looking at scaling down densities, going from single family to multifamily, then to commercials is pretty standard. That's always what we recommend, to have a good transition between single family and commercial. So they're implementing more of a transition here and squaring off this commercial lot. And so there's a portion here that's rezoning to R3, a portion here that it is R3 that they're rezoning to commercial to be able to square that off. Don Avenue is actually down this way where the new gym is. Ideally, that Don Avenue would come up around this way, and this will be an outlot. I kind of drew this boundary on here. You don't know, it could be 2 lots, but that's generally the commercial area that it'll be once it's said and done. And then lastly, what they actually don't have today, which we think is an effort from the applicant that we think is a good transition. See this yellow to the south? This boundary here, they are requesting to rezone a buffer area. So there's Meadow Lake, annexed in is now R1A single family residential, currently adjacent to multifamily residential, meaning that multifamily development as it is today could build up directly to Meadow Lake on the border. with this request, the applicant is actually putting in a single-family, it's the R1C single-family attached, so it'll be the duplex style is what that allows for. And this puts a buffer of single-family duplexes, kind of two-family, in between the proposed multifamily and the existing single-family to the south. So again, you got the transition to the north where it's single-family existing where it was commercial. Now you have multifamily to the commercial, and then in between the multifamily proposed to the existing single-family, you'll have a row of duplexes, so you're not having an apartment building directly to a single-family. So we think this proposed zoning is actually a pretty good plan for the area. Again, this was kind of the idea when they first came in and annexed it, but they didn't know how the lots were going to be laid out, and so this is them coming in with a consolidation. So the reason you're not seeing a consolidation plat tonight is they're not creating a new lot. It's 8 lots going down into 3, and when that happens, it only goes to council for approval. Planning and zoning doesn't have to review that. But that's why you guys are reviewing the zoning, and then when it goes to council, if the plat is ready at that time, council will not only review the rezoning, but also the consolidation to have the 3 new developable lots. So we do recommend approval, and I am open for any questions if you have it. Oh, so let me go. This is the exhibit that was submitted. I apologize. I'll throw that up there as well. It has the actual acreage that are surveyed out. So.
How many units are they planning to put on the multi-family?
So we haven't seen a site plan for that yet. This is just getting the land ready for it. So with our recommendation, we're saying, yes, this area with its proximity to commercial and the highway is appropriate for multifamily. When they come in with building plans in the future, it'll have to make sure it meets our building code density, parking, stormwater, and screening requirements between other uses, that there's enough open space. But at this time, we don't require the site plan to know how many units are there.
How many acres is the R2, proposed R2?
To the south will
Yes.
be
About approximately.
3 acres. So you have a 3-acre buffer in between the single family and the multifamily.
Any other questions, comments by anyone on the board?
Sal, you mentioned the area that was outside the city yet, in that turquoise area back in that one map that you showed.
Yes.
So how can we be rezoning property that's outside the city limits?
So we're not. Thank you. So this is, I drew this on here just to kind of show a general area once it's going to be developed, how the lots are going to look. And I apologize, this last slide is the actual exhibit of what's getting rezoned.
Okay.
It's cut out because this is not annexed yet, but ideally and expectedly, when they come in to annex this piece, they'll square off that commercial lot. It's just not annexed yet. And so that's what I was trying to show, that when it is annexed, they'll have a row of outlots available along the highway.
Okay, thank you.
So
Any
this
other-
is contiguous to Pottery Road on that end.
Yes, it's got frontage along the highway here, as well as South Old Pottery here. So not great access, to South Old Pottery here. What we're anticipating, again, we won't know until we get a site plan, but what we're anticipating is that Don Avenue will be extended and will be the access to this property is how we envision it. But
And a second way into it?
depending on the amount of units. So once you hit a certain amount of units, we require a second way out. I think it's 99 units. So they could build up to 99 with one way in, one way out, as long as there's an approved turnaround. And that's from the fire code, not the zoning code.
Right.
Yep.
Any other comments by board members, questions?
Sal, is it the intention of the applicant to annex the property in your description on that photo?
I believe so, but they are here, yes, because there's no way to access this property with Don Avenue until this gets annexed. So this area in turquoise here will have to get annexed at some point for them to access it appropriately. So.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments by board? Anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this? Please come on up.
Can I move this up here?
Yeah.
I have a hard time seeing.
It is okay, right?
My name is Gary Dussault. Some of you may remember me from the last time. I had a little problem with some of this and the way it was going. I do like and struggle at the same time with how they're developing and putting that buffer zone for the subdivision. The only thing I would like to really put more thought in it is how come we're not doing it on the north end for the 3 homeowners over there? We're not getting that buffer. We're getting right from R3 to R1. So I'd really like to consider that as part of it, the rezoning, and see if we can help and put an R1 buffer to our section of the land as well. That's the only thing I really don't like with this. It really shows that you're paying attention to the subdivision, Meadow Lake, but you're not doing anything for the 3 neighbors up at the top. They're all here, we're all here. And we're wondering, why is that not being applied?
We'll check on that.
I sure appreciate it, because I'd like that buffer there just as well, to give us the break between, because now it's even going to be more dense as far as the population goes with the R3 development going across the whole north end.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else that would like to speak? Come on up.
I just want to reiterate what Gary had said. I'm Rick Moore. I live in the west location there, the residents on the west side. And like the other 2 of us, the same situation. We don't see why we can't have some sort of a buffer going from the one to the other while they do get it down at Meadow Lake. So it seems like that just reiterate pretty much what Gary said.
Okay,
So.
thanks.
Thank you.
Come on up.
We have a question as to how much of a setback from the existing lot lines
For
is
the R2?
required?
For the R2?
Well, for the
So it'll have a 25-foot rear yard setback, so anything built in this R1C, R2 would be duplexes will have a 25-foot rear yard and a 25-foot front yard, so it has to be
Okay.
at least that deep. And then the multifamily technically has a 25-foot front, and then the sides are different depending on how many stories it is. But multifamily almost always has to have a 360 fire lane, and that's 26 feet on itself.
Okay.
So 26 feet at least.
Is there any plan that you know of at this point to maintain any kind of a tree buffer in that setback?
So the applicant may be able to offer that. We do have screening requirements between different uses. So there will be, like to the north, we will have to have, say this multifamily is adjacent to the single family. There is a screening requirement. To the south, I mean, there will have to be screening between the multifamily and single family, but now this buffer is technically single family, so that single family is the buffer.
Oh, okay.
There won't be any screening requirements between the duplexes and Meadow Lake.
Great. Thank you.
What's your name, sir?
Bill Mayhew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone from Unnerstall that would like to come up and answer a couple of questions?
My name is Kurt Unnerstall. I'm one requesting a rezoning. As far as what we're trying to get accomplished here is the history of this Camp Schrader farm, the land to the north or to the south, those folks, Camp Schrader sold those folks 40 feet of buffer off of that farm originally. But again, to make the transition from the homes to the south to the residential planned units to the north, we went ahead and went with the duplexes along there. Their concerns that they have on the 3 property owners, all of their homes sit up against the road, and if well, more than welcome to come out there. I can take you for a ride and I can show these guys, but basically, if we would zone R1 behind them, we would have to take down all the vegetation and really mess with the contours of the land. And what we're trying to do is place all of that in undisturbed state and work it down. So what I'm trying to say is what we're working on is the apartments that are going to be stair-stepped in there are actually going to be farther away than if we were to try to plat R1 up against it. As you know, 10,000 square feet's 25 feet front, 25 feet in the back, and about 40 in the middle. So if we were to zone it up against their property, they would actually have buildings tighter to them than the R3. All we're doing is cleaning up the R3 just so that in the process of laying out the apartment complex, if a corner of a parking lot is, 21 feet or 22 feet, the parking lot doesn't fall into a zoning issue. So we're just trying to clean up the zoning up in that area is why we're doing it, and we're eliminating commercial. And my plan eventually will bring in the rest of the Jasper Farm that's not zoned in right now. We just have never done it. We will, as Sal mentioned, have to bring Don Avenue in, and I actually have access off the Highway 100. So we'll bring all that road network connect, and that piece, John, that goes straight to the north. I don't have a little pointer there. If you point to that,
Right here?
that's another actual 50-foot right-of-way access
Okay.
to the farm that we plan on tying that in when all that ends up being built on. So that'll be your fire lane access, but the primary resident access will come from Don Avenue and from Highway 100. You can kind of show them there in the middle of that red. Right there, there's an access point. We're currently,
Cut this lot in half.
yeah, we're currently filling that lot, but eventually that'll all be leveled off and there'll be a road network tying off of 100. So again, I hope to have plans further drawn up in the next couple of months, but this was part of the process of the folks that I'm working with to get the zoning right, and then they're working with some architects to do the layout, but the preliminary layout that I've shown Sal actually shows the buildings further off of their line.
To the west.
To the north.
Northwest,
Yeah,
yeah.
their homes are in the green space up north, and we're actually, as you can see how that stair steps, that property stair steps, I really can't build up against them because they've got so much zigzagging going on back there. So I don't understand why they would want something zoned, because once I zone it, then I got to build it. If I got to build it, I got to doze it. So my method is just clean up the zoning. There's going to be a bigger buffer than what's required. Is an R3, is it 15 or 20 foot?
It'd be a 20-foot buffer required with landscaping
Yeah.
between there, regardless.
And right now, we've got trees planned in that area and trying not to disturb the existing soils.
Do you know approximately how far it will be away, the building and?
I don't think the closest building is going to be within 50 feet of their property. It might be some parking lot, but it won't be a building.
Okay.
Now, there will be a road, like I said, the road, to satisfy John's concerns, the road will come up and have a second access in from the north through there. For, in case there was ever a blockage down below, the fire trucks could get in. So,
Any other questions or comments of Kurt? From the board first. Yep.
Kurt, can you talk about just, I hear a lot of really positive things about your vegetation plan and planning to keep the topography. About how many units are you fitting in, and about, how little, I guess, could you speak a little more to what you're planning to present?
I don't think we're not even close to the maximum, and Sal's more up on the numbers, what I'd submitted preliminarily, but, we're not at all near the maximum. So again, what I'm trying to do on this property is work with the contours of the land. In fact, Sal, if you could point from the little triangular piece to the red piece, right there, as that goes along Highway 100, go up now to the corner, straight on up along the highway parallel. Right in there, there's a ridge in there. So our plan is to stair step those apartment complex buildings versus tabletopping it and doing a lot of blasting. Because one of the concerns they had And I fully noted it. I think Gary made the comment, hey, I don't want to be living up on a flat plateau up here, and you blast everything out from underneath me. So we're trying to make the land blend in with their land, and then consequently leave the vegetation. So that's what we're trying to do.
Any other questions, comments by board? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Larry Beck, and we're the third house at the end of the road. And I guess, Kurt, that's one of the questions. You talked about the second access. Is it going to be the
If you
driveway
could
between-
talk to the
the
microphone.
driveway between Gary and our house, or that other road next to Rick's?
Yeah, right now, we're gonna utilize the city right of way that's there. Again, that'll just be a backdoor fire access. It won't be the primary access to the development. But the fire department requires it to have second access.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Actually, that'll be a city street road.
I lost it, Mark.
You've lost control.
If it's just fire lane, it's 26. If it's dedicated city, it's 35. So it kind of depends on what we end up doing, or what you end up doing, so.
If you would, come back up, so.
I just want to clear the air.
Yes, yes, that's fine. We just have to get it done.
I don't quite follow when you say how our homes have the street on the top. I mean,
your home's face Old Podger Road.
but the subdivision has a street too. They have a street by their houses, just like we do.
Yeah.
And you're using that to back up why you don't want to put R1 there because we have that street there. I don't understand that.
No, R1, what I just explained to the board is that if I put R1 behind your house,
Yep,
okay, I have to build on it then.
I understood that part, but you also use the road as reckoning for why you can put R3 up there because we have that main street right there. That's what I thought you said when you first came up
No,
here.
but all that land is already R3. Can you flip to the other map?
No, I know it's R3 on this side, it's C2 on that side.
Right, so do you want commercial there?
No, we would prefer the buffer like you're doing down on the other subdivision with the R1. It's an R1C.
When the site plan
Wait.
is submitted, he will have to put some sort of screening or describe some things as required, but this is,
15 or 20-foot buffer in the backyard.
What he's saying is if he had to put R2 or R1 there, he would have to develop closer to your lot line to make that work.
But they're having a 25-foot buffer and I'm having a 15-foot buffer.
No, what's the 25-foot?
R1?
What's the
There's
buffer?
25-foot buffer to the south here between, because your yard has to be 25 feet. I mean, there's no way the apartments can be within 25 feet. It's going to be at least 25 feet with the buffer.
I think it's 50 in R3.
With the-
Buildings can't be closer than that 50
Yeah.
feet. So,
Buildings
so
don't
Gary,
park.
what we're trying to say, Gary, is down below, the way it is zoned right now, we could put apartment complex and parking lots right in the backyard of Meadow Lake subdivision. Okay, because that's flat ground and lays
Right.
good for that. But in interest to be, concerns that they had, and one of the guys I grew up with as a kid, I made a promise to him, I said, I'm not gonna put buildings right in your backyard, so we're gonna do duplexes, then we're gonna do apartments, okay? Your land sits up high, the land slopes off, as you well know.
Yep.
If I work with the land, all the buildings are gonna be down below you. But if you force me to put R1 up there, then all I can do is knock everything down and flatten it out right in your backyard. And pick up a rock and you'll hit a house. So I'm building off of you by what I'm doing. The only reason I'm doing the duplexes down there is because they're laying flat to the ground. You guys sit up way up high, and my land is down below you.
All right. The only other one that wasn't brought up is when this all occurs and happens, we're all on septic and sewer. I mean, septic tanks and water is our wells. We don't have any of the city water or city sewer. What happens then?
Mr. Nilgis and I are working on a plan to get you city sewer and water. We actually brought up sewer to Meadow Lake subdivision, now they're all on city sewer. and we just completed a phase. Sal, if you can click on the second turquoise block right there in the corner. We actually just installed city sewer 2 weeks ago, right into the blue, at the blue corner, yellow turquoise, there's city sewer right there. So as this land develops, our goal is to get all you guys city services. But that's really between you and the city. We are going to provide sewer up in where, well, the new zoning will be blue, but where the red is now, that'll all have sewer up in there.
And we can still stay on well?
You can, yeah, that's
Yeah.
between you and the DNR and the city. I don't know how,
Yeah.
well, I know you have to hook the sewer because it's a health issue.
Yeah, I had a big argument with that.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the water requirements are, if you have to hook to a water well or not, but I know you have to hook to a sewer because it's a sanitary safety issue.
Yeah, that was
I don't know if we require it until DNR gets involved. That'd be a question for our attorney. I don't think it's required unless there's an issue.
You have an issue with your system from DNR.
Yeah, if your
Then they
system's
might
not
make you.
working properly, technically, I don't think you have to hook up, but if your system discharges sewage onto any neighbor, not just me,
No,
any neighbor,
I just replaced it like 5 or 6 years ago.
well, if it operates fine, I think you're okay.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Any other comments, questions?
I just have a question about the access points to the properties up there. We talked about one to the east, tucked down here, and then the fire lane. And then Kurt and I had talked a couple times about making a property switch a little bit to the, right on Pottery Road where we own some property there, to where there's a little section there that is very little area that he can get in there. I wondered, will that ever need to be an access point, or how does that work?
So it depends on, what they submit to build.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think every 100 units, and I don't know if the market would even allow for, the need for 3 or 4 entrances here. But every 100 units, you have to have another access point. And so it's up to them if they want to count this as one and this as one, or if he can get in here, he can submit those plans and we'll review them at that time.
okay.
But
What are your thoughts on that, Kurt? As far as, you and I talked
I
about.
don't have it final engineered yet, but right now, we plan on just using the current right of way to the straight north.
So,
Okay, so
But
then,
again, we're working with some individuals that are looking at that as we speak.
so in other words, at this point, it doesn't look like there will be an
It
entrance.
doesn't look like we're gonna need that access.
Okay, good, that's what I want to know, thanks.
Come on up.
My name's Steve Hoffman, and I'm one of the property owners in Meadow Lake Farm. I guess one, I would just tell Kurt, I appreciate the zoning change here because we appreciate having single-family homes there. I guess my question would be, do you have a kind of a general idea of the type of duplexes that you'll be putting in? It's hard to talk to you and talk to the microphone. I'm sorry to hear that. Great, okay, good. So not at this
It'll
time.
all be brick fronts, soft, well, Amy goes from out on West Fifth Street, it'd be very similar to what there. If you go in Hanover Place on Ninth Street, I've seen that development, those are brick villas with copper roofs. They'll be.
That's rough the quality.
Same quality as this town was built.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Thanks. Any other questions, comments? Any further discussion by board members? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
First and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. That will be at council. also?
next week, so
Next week.
a week from today.
Yep. All right, moving on. Cell towers.
Yeah, I do just have a couple discussion items, and I'm going to add one on here as well. This is kind of going to be our preliminary code change discussion for 3 different items, and then next month we'll have our public hearing on any changes we decide to do. First thing that came up was, as you guys all are aware, we had a cell tower that was approved just last meeting. It was approved at council. That tower was only, I believe, 80 feet, so it wasn't a necessarily tall tower. That was the first tower we had requested and approved since we overhauled our entire zoning code in 2017. And as you guys are all aware, when PGAV did that, our consultants, there was a lot changed in there. Some of it, they took examples from other communities. And one of those is that no cell tower can be built if it's over 100 feet. The developer, AT&T, came back and they were requesting another tower for this month. And it was 120 feet, I believe, maybe 140, somewhere around there, on the other side of town. And, at first we thought maybe they'd have to go for a variance or get an amendment to, when they got this approved, be it conditionalized to be taller. And then after talking with Mark, we realized that it's really it's not permissible at all. Cell towers above 100 feet are not permitted at all. I do think that is kind of an oversight that we had when we approved our code. That is not a very tall tower, especially in an area where we definitely have some dead spots around town. I think, in my opinion, we are hindering our telecommunications development and access to our citizens with lowering that requirement. If you go back to our last 3 cell towers prior to the one we just did, so from, I think it was 2008, Gina pulled them up until like 2014 with the last 3, and they were 160 feet, 140 feet, and then right at 100 feet. And so we have good precedent that we've approved taller towers. It's just, I think this code, honestly, was probably copied from a town that maybe was maybe a little bit smaller or had different topography, that 100 feet was better for that. Well, with our topography and our hills, I just don't think it's feasible. We're going to have a lot of cell towers come and either ask for variances or, in this case, not be permitted at all. So I have just kind of 3 options here. I went to some other communities' websites and kind of looked at what they do. And I do have my own recommendation, but I think I'm open to being persuaded or listening to Piontek. One option. The first option here is, and I literally just copied this from a town. I think this was even in Florida. I just was going through a list of them today. But you could do different height restrictions based on the underlying zone district. So if it's in industrial, if it's in commercial, we don't allow it in residential already, period. But if it's in like a downtown or mixed use, we could have different height requirements. That would take a little bit more homework. We'd have to decide which one we want. But I could understand why if you're in an industrial park, maybe we'd be a little more persuasive to having it taller rather than in like a neighborhood commercial district or a C1 district, then we would have a little bit lower. And so this one has all the way down from 90 up to 150 is what this town did. The second, and I saw this in multiple communities, and I think this one is from Kirkwood, I believe. Sorry, I didn't label these. I guess it doesn't really matter, but I saw this in multiple communities that they actually don't have a height maximum. What they do is they just define how the height is determined, because I guess there are some towers that retract and they have antennas and they can increase, decrease. So they define how the height is, and this is just a very complex definition of how you can compute height. And then as long as it meets the setback requirements and gets a special use permit, then there is no height requirement. Each one is reviewed on a case-by-case basis, which really is kind of what we already do anyway. We do review most. And then lastly, a third option, I think, is what we could do is just change our maximum height. That would be the simplest change to our code. Right now, it just says no more than 100 feet. We could pick a new one. I just threw out possibly 200. I thought maybe we had taller towers. I was surprised that our tallest one was 160. The one with the flag on it looks, I think, a lot taller because it's on top of a hill, but it is a 160-foot pole. So that's an option if we want to pick a number, and that would obviously be the simplest change to the code. And I do think it would still allow for additional, telecommunications development in Washington. So that would be my recommendation, is to pick a number. At this time, if we're going to be reviewing it case by case, I don't know if 200 is really a terrible number to go with. I mean, I know it's taller than most of our towers, but if someone comes in with a 200-foot tower, and the reason I picked that is really because it's the requirements. Once you go above 200 feet, the requirements change for FAA requirements. There's lighting, and I think it gets a lot more expensive for towers to be, once they're above 200, not only structurally, but permit-wise. And so I thought, well, we could just kind of use that federal threshold. And that's kind of where I left this one, I thought would be an easy change. Now, the reason I didn't necessarily want to do this middle one, where there is no height maximum, is because right now in our code, if a cell tower is considered to be disguised, it does not have to get a special use permit, and as long as it meets setbacks, they can just be built. Now, we don't have a ton of huge properties in town. You know, most of them, if they're going to meet setbacks, they can't be a certain height already. They're already going to have that trouble, and I'm not proposing to change that. I still think it needs to meet the setbacks from residential and all that. But if something came in another flagpole and it's considered disguised, there'd be no height maximum. So I think maybe in this case we could still have, if something comes in disguise, it would still have to meet not only setbacks that we currently have, which is the height of the tower from any residential structure, and then any equipment has to meet normal setbacks. And then lastly, if it's not disguised, then it would have to, or if it is, it could still have to meet that 200 max. So I'm open to discussion, and I don't necessarily need a motion or anything tonight. Again, I'm going to have a public hearing on our next agenda for this item, as well as our next two. Just kind of thought it'd be a good month to do a swoop of code revisions, and that way we can kind of talk about it. You guys can think it over, but I'm open to discussion on it.
Well, Sal, great initiative, one, and a monopole, 200 feet is the maximum height of a monopole anyway. So is it specifically described as monopole, or do we have any descriptions on cell tower type?
No, so I mean, our requirements don't change, but yeah, I mean, you could do lattice. I mean, we do have different definitions for monopole lattice if it's a guide tower, guide wire tower, but
yeah, the tubular style monopole tower being the, I don't know if we allow other things with, the bandings and stuff. Because it was so short, we never had to consider something other than a monopole tower because it's much cheaper than some of these other things.
Yeah, we've never, not since I've been here, and not that I can think of any existing towers, I think they're all monopole.
Yeah. So 200 feet is probably, wherever you got that from, that's as tall as you can make a monopole tower with it being structurally sound, I think. So I would definitely go for that one, but maybe to further describe it as monopole and then have other tower uses. I don't know if people want to look at a 200-foot tall radio tower sort of looking thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But that would be my input there.
So if it's monopole, you're saying if it's not monopole, have a lower requirement?
Or have that a case-by-case or special use permit.
Well, I guess we could write directly into the language, because right now it doesn't allow for any type of variance. I mean, it just says it's not permitted if you can't meet that application. I mean, council can't approve it. It's by ordinance already. I guess we could write it in there that any amendment to the height could be approved on a case-by-case basis, Mark, or?
No.
No? Okay.
And sometimes, and I've had this discussion with Sal, sometimes we look at a variance as, we just don't like the code the way it was written at the particular time. We don't like how it applies to this particular use, so we're going to suggest they go get a variance. That's really not the appropriate use of a variance.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to be looking at a piece of property that, because of its unusual size, configuration, location, is unique to that particular piece of property. So I'm not a big fan. I know we've done it quite a bit in the past, and I think we really ought to get away from doing that. It sort of makes the Board of Adjustments a super city council, that they can override the views of the city council on a particular issue if they think it's appropriate. And that's really not the correct use of a variance. So if you're going to have, if you're going to change the height requirements, and I have no issue with that, it ought to be done in a way that you're not sending somebody to the Board of Adjustment, because I don't think that's appropriate.
I would agree with that too, Mark. That's a good approach to it.
Well noted. Then Sal, back to if a disguised monopole tower is 200 feet tall, I think then it should just go green light in this case. And then if someone wants to put some sort of a radio tower or something, depending on, do you want to look, do you want to know who has to look at it if they're going to be fine with that? It just hasn't been an issue because no one would build one 100 feet tall.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Mark, do you have an opinion one way or another about what your preference would be of these proposed amendments?
I don't.
Okay. Do you have maybe preference is the wrong word, do you have a recommendation?
I don't.
Okay.
That's absolutely your call.
Hey, Sal,
Yes.
I mean, what is the average height of, like Union and other, like Pacific Eureka? I mean, they've got about a lot of the same topography as we do around here.
Yeah, I did not see on Unions what their height maximum was. They require the special use permit, so I don't know if it's something they review. They had the same setbacks as us, the residential. It's the height of the tower from a residential plus 10 feet, which is what we have. Now, I think just the average is, I mean, I think because of our topography, and if they're going to build it, they're going to probably build it on a hill. I think it'd be rare to see one much above 160 feet because they have the advantage of the topography in that case. And actually, Nicole's here. She was with the company who originally asked for the cell tower, and I told them, well, it's not going to be this month. So I don't know if maybe you have, just from your experience, what an average cell tower height normally is.
If you could come up, and we're going to make you come up and speak.
So it's very tough to speak to a specific height because so much of it is dependent on the carrier and their existing network and where their existing sites are and how tall those are. I do kind of believe, though, that in a city, you're looking, most of them are around that 180, 200 foot marker. There are times, there's definitely carriers out there, depending on how their network is set up, that would want something higher. And so, you'd have to consider how would they account for that. And, they may legitimately need that taller tower just to make it work within their network and meet their coverage objectives, so.
If a cell site were selected for something taller than 200 feet, is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
Or-
meaning, again, every carrier is a little different.
Mhm.
And so I couldn't say right now that for the next 20 years, AT&T isn't going to need a tower greater than 200 feet in the city. Right now, in this very moment, like Sal was saying, I mean, you're averaging that 160
Mhm.
range, a little bit taller than that, but it's really hard to project because the technology is changing so fast and the need for wireless is changing so fast, what that's going to look like in 10 years.
What sort of cell tower would be built at 500 feet or a greater height if it were deemed necessary? I mean,
At 500 feet is a guide tower, so
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways you can build a tower. I would say our general guidelines have been when you're looking at that 150 and below, you're probably closer to a monopole.
Mhm.
You can do a monopole up to 200 feet, but then they just start getting very large in diameter at the base, and it also makes it very difficult for it to support the amount of equipment. So then you start limiting how many carriers can go on that tower, how much equipment can go up there. So while I guess it's feasible, it can get challenging and it might be better suited to have a self-supported 200.
mhm.
Any other questions? Thanks.
Thank you. Would the drop zone or fall zone of the tower, I guess, that's related entirely to the height of the current tower anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's.
You wouldn't have to change
the
any
actual
language.
drops, or fall zone is typically, I think, half the height of the tower, because it's supposed to break in half, right? I think,
Okay.
and then they still have to be from, because you only have to be so many feet from, like, a commercial structure. If it's a residential structure, it's, commercial structure on the same site. So if you own a
Shed.
parcel and you have a commercial piece of property and you want to put a cell tower there, you don't have to be the height of the tower from your own property. It's if you have residential neighbors. That's where it has to be the height of the tower.
Neighboring building.
Yeah, and I think it's when you're on your own property, I think it's half the height of the tower.
And then from your neighbors, it's the full height of the tower
Plus 10 feet.
Okay.
Well, it says from a residential structure. It doesn't actually say from a neighboring property, it's just any residential structure.
Not a
It's like that
commercial.
last one that we just approved. It was closer to the right-of-way, and it was, I think, 200 feet from that apartment building across the street, and the tower was only 80 feet, so it wasn't a problem. But we just would have measured from any residential structure within the height of the tower.
Is it only residential structure because a commercial or industrial structure is expected to survive the falling of the tower, or why just residential?
That is a good question, but it is pretty clear about it being a residential
Yeah,
structure.
yeah. Just why? If we're fixing it, let's fix it, that's all.
I don't think you'd want to have it fall on your business, would you?
What's that?
I don't think you would want to have it fall on your business, would you?
No, it certainly would not, no. And it could, and if something like this fell and would damage a building and hurt people, I mean, people work during the day and sleep at night, so it makes sense to cover all buildings.
Anymore, that's a 24/7,
Of course,
of
course.
commercial building.
yeah.
Can you
So
find it, Sal?
what I'm hearing, well, yeah, I'm going to pull that up too, but so when it gets to setbacks, the language says, support structures except disguised support structures shall not be located within 200 feet of any residential structure. And then the next paragraph says, all wireless support structures except disguised support structures shall not be separated from any residential structure at least the distance equal to the height of the tower support structure plus 10 feet.
Okay.
And then there's also minimum setbacks that it has to meet just for like the equipment on the ground.
Well, I would be in favor of keeping it as simplistic as we can, just from the purpose of staff reviewing it and then us looking at it too, if it comes to us. So
in that case, it would really just be, I think the simplest would be changing, there's one section here on height, and it just says, hold up. Yeah, 400.335 just says, total height, no wireless support structure shall be permitted to have a total height in excess of 100 feet. We could just change that to 200.
200 and,
Good.
So I'll have that on next month's agenda as an actual public hearing, and then send it to council as soon as that's done.
Everybody pretty much in agreement with that?
Would this also be the time or opportunity to say that we should add different buildings too? Not just residential. I mean, if you think it's twice as tall, that's twice the tower to fall on something.
Yeah, I mean, because that location and setback section has any wireless support structure except disguised support structures should not be located within 200 feet of any residential structure. And I think the problem being with, if we change that to any structure,
Outside of the,
if someone wants to put it on their own property, they're
well, you say outside of property ownership, because you're not going to have if the person owned the house that was next door too, you could make the argument that they would, allow it conditionally. But if they own the buildings, that's fine. But maybe a neighboring or non-petitioner owned or whatever the basic language would be to have somebody else be able to agree or disagree with having a 200-foot tower looming over their building.
any neighboring structure. I mean,
it does make sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just change, that would be, I'll get the actual language to you guys, but basically, again, so we're clear, it's not on their own property. So if you're leasing it, correct, you're not putting your risk, because you're putting yourself at risk anyway. It's a neighboring property. Okay.
Yes, right, absolutely.
Any neighboring property.
Yeah, absolutely. Any property you
neighboring
don't own, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that'll be too hard to do.
Or structure specifically, not just property.
Occupied structure.
Sure. Well,
right?
A structure. It's hard to say, but yeah. You don't want to get too far in the weeds, but
Well, I
yeah,
know,
it makes
but I
sense what you're
mean-
saying.
Well, I guess it depends on how you define occupied. I mean, occupied by humans, I suppose. I mean,
Or somebody's chicken house.
storage facility, but I don't know that I want a cell tower falling where I store my Corvette.
We should probably just say structure at the moment.
Okay, I'll go along with that. I just,
Yeah. Point taken.
you got to define structure then.
Sure.
You got it, Sal?
Got it.
Okay. You ready to move on?
Yes. So this next one I think will be pretty easy. I had a phone call from someone wanting to, they said, we have counseling services. It was the business that they have. And they looked up, before they even called me, they went online, they pulled up our zoning matrix, and social correctional treatment and counseling services, when you go to the uses, it's a special use permit downtown, but then it's only permitted in industrial districts. Separate from that, there is a substance abuse agency treatment center and clinic that is a special use permit in all commercial industrial districts. I really don't know why this got put into the industrials. I don't know if there was a fear of not wanting that use close by, but I think if we can have this second substance abuse agency treatment center as a special use, surely this correctional use and counseling services that's already a special use in downtown can also be a special use in C1 and C2. So that would be my recommendation, to just add an S on the tables for a special use permit to allow social, correctional, treatment, and counseling services as a special use in C1 and C2 as well. Because when this person was saying they wanted to be in Washington and they looked at this, I told them either had to find something downtown, which is going to be overly, more expensive for the price per square foot, or go out to the industrial park, and that just did not.
Or start having AA meetings, right? Or start having AA meetings, right?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, yeah.
Yeah, that seems pretty, almost arbitrary, yeah.
So I thought that was kind of an oversight, and I didn't think that would be a big deal, but I wanted to bring that up to see if anyone had any other thoughts. I just thought that was a silly thing to tell someone you had to go to the industrial park to have some type of counseling service, so. Especially if it's something that people can't get to on their own. You don't want it way out to the west.
Right.
So I will have that change as well. If no one has any other comments, again, we can have it as an actual public hearing. And then lastly, this one, again, from trying to keep people away from the Board of Adjustment for when it's not needed, I thought this would be a good discussion. Right now, our commercial height restrictions for C2, which is a general commercial, is 3 stories or 35 feet, whatever is lesser. And we have gotten, again, no building permits, but people doing a lot of homework. And I will just say 2 hotels have called. And when these chain flagship hotels, the people who have the franchisee, typically, they have the box that they are permitted to build to make the model work. And if the town doesn't allow that, they will just go to a different town. They're not going to chase it, especially whenever if they're going to get the flagship out here. They have to have if they need a variance or if they need a change, they have to have that already secured, is what they told me, before the flagship will approve the site. And there's a number of uses that this could affect, but the main thing is, I think if we did the study in last February, we paid to have that hotel study done. It said we have the need or the capacity for an additional 100 rooms without having an oversupply of rooms. And I think, this could be as encouraging to that development, for economic development reasons. But on top of that, I don't know if it's necessarily a hindrance if we did just add a floor. Both of those said they needed 4 floors. The only other uses I could think of, again, it could happen, but in C2 would be a medical office or just a regular office, business office, someone to do something like the Washington Business Center and have multiple tenants and have a traditional office. Again, that's a targeted use that we're trying to get it into the city, kind of more of those, I do want to call them white-collar jobs of office. We've mentioned that as a targeted use, and I think maybe this could just be encouraging to show, hey, look, you get more bang for your buck on this property if we allow an additional floor. I don't necessarily think it would be such a bad thing. So there's 2 options here. Again, one much more complicated than the other, but obviously what most communities of our size would do would just be they just set the height. Right now it's 3. You could do 4 stories or 50 feet, whatever's lesser. And then the other option is, which a lot of cities do, but I think maybe something that a little more dense than us. I know I was looking in the St. Louis region. I think St. Louis does it. Kirkwood does floor area ratio, but you could set a floor area ratio where basically there's no maximum height per se. You have a maximum floor area ratio, and it all depends on the square footage of your land compared to the building. So if you had a floor area ratio, you could say in C2 you had a floor area ratio of 1. So if you're filling up the whole lot, you get 1 story. If you're filling up half the lot, you get 2. If you're filling up a quarter of the lot, you get 4 stories. So it's basically the less land you're taking, the higher you can go. I know that's a way that a lot of cities control density to make sure you get some open space and sunlight, is how they do floor area ratio. I was kind of surprised to see Kirkwood do it, but just looking, this is really the 2 options when you want to control height. I think you have to just set a maximum or set it by floor area ratio. I actually see the benefit of floor area ratio if we were doing something downtown, possibly, in a change to our C3 district. But my recommendation would be to set a change for the C2 along the highway, or not along the highway, but along a general commercial, to change that 4 stories. I think it will entice additional development, not only a needed for our tourism division or tourism economy, but also maybe to encourage some office development. It could be a good thing. You got to keep in mind you're adding a floor because it could be adjacent to residential, but you're still always going to have the screening requirements. You're still going to have the setback requirements. You're still going to have parking and stormwater, all those things to protect. I'm not so convinced that adding a 4-story compared to 3 will really hinder a neighbor that's already existing next to a C2. So,
Sal, I think where that 3 stories or 35 feet came from originally was probably with the ISO grading schedule.
so it does get more
Years
expensive.
and years ago, where that was the criteria that they determined when you needed a ladder truck.
And I think you're correct where once it's over 35 feet, it automatically has to get sprinkled,
Yes.
no matter what.
Correct.
And I think that's perfectly fine still. I mean, at
Correct.
this point,
Right.
any office building or hotel is going to have to be sprinkled anyway.
Correct. So that's why I'm saying I think that's really kind of a moot point anymore because the fire code addresses the extra height.
I see. It was kind of taken, before the fire code was adopted, maybe it was taken.
Before you had all that going on, it was the 3-story or 35 feet.
Okay.
That's why we have 35-foot ladders.
John, from a safety standpoint, would you have any concerns about making that type of a change?
No, because anything over that 3 stories is going to have to be sprinkled.
Okay.
That's why you don't have 4-story apartment buildings unless they're fully sprinkled. And they have to meet all the life safety codes and everything else that come into play with egress and exits and all that. So, the codes now, the building codes address some of the stuff that the zoning, or the zoning code, I guess it is, maybe didn't address as much in detail previously. So, yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Any additional consideration to the application of the historic district when it comes to 4 stories, or?
Well, so our historic district already allows 8.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can already go up to 8 in our downtown district.
The only time it was ever in discussion was the Modern Auto Building when Stratman was mayor, and some guy had a plan, and it was an 8-story. Well, we all had a cow, but at the same time, it was allowed, but it never happened. So,
Yeah.
and I think Andy's is either 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
His is 3, and the bank is
Bank
5,
is
but
5.
but the bank, I think, it's 8 stories or 100 feet, and I think the bank actually gets pretty close to that because of their ceiling heights are so.
They're different, right. It's not necessarily a true story.
Yeah.
Right.
So don't worry about the historic because it's already
Yeah.
screwed. But we can argue it, so. No, I think that first option with just go with the 4 stories.
Yeah.
Unless somebody's really the floor area ratio you think is a better way. You want to, again, simple is the way to go.
Yeah.
As much as you can, I think.
I don't think we're quite to the development, speed that the floor area ratio really needs. That's really meant for protecting densities and sunlight and open space and that kind of thing. And I just don't know if we're, yeah. So, but I was looking, and there's the only 2 options I saw a lot of communities did were either floor area ratio or maximum height. So,
I'm sure places like Chesterfield or Clayton would probably use the
Yeah.
floor area height.
yeah, I know you're right. Clayton and Kirkwood both do. I saw.
Yeah.
Union still has the 35 feet. I called them today. But so.
We'll put them in the shade.
Put them in the shade.
Go for it.
Well, that's all I have. So I just.
Everybody's in agreement with the 50? Pretty much. Great.
Thank you guys. So next month will kind of be our code revision. And we'll have an actual public hearing for it. We'll have 3 of them. And then as of right now, if they're still planning, I was told that you'll have a pretty decent-sized plan development coming in on 2nd Street, like 2nd Stafford area. Trying to think of who you stole that. Stumpy property. Yeah, it's under contract, and I've seen the preliminary plan. It does, looks nice, but they need to finalize it for a plan development, and they were hoping to have that done.
The creek under,
That's planned to pipe it, because it's pipe under the road there and just
Yeah.
extend that same size, so.
how exciting.
Yeah.
That's the library tax district, I love it.
Mayor, do you have something else?
Well, I do have one item that I would like to mention, is that we normally have a Missouri Main Street Conference every year, the state conference. And this year, obviously, it was supposed to be held in July and never happened. But they still gave awards, and so you could nominate individuals for certain awards. And so we all had a watch party a few weeks ago over at Plush. Maybe it was last week. Was it last week? Anyway, maybe the week before.
Yeah, the week before.
Anyway, to see who won the awards, and our very own Sal won.
Thank you. Appreciate it, thank you very much.
Outstanding public official.
Public,
Mhm.
yes, statewide, this is,
Thank you very much.
Well deserved.
Yes.
yes.
We had a couple other winners. Andy won, I don't know what his category was, but it was for all his development.
Yeah, it was the development on Front Street, and then the lady that developed Plush, Deb Geffen, was nominated, and she was one of the 3 finalists, but she didn't win it this time, so.
But we were very proud of Sal.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great.
Definitely.
It's always nice to get recognition.
Any other business? If not, I'll entertain one last motion.
Make a motion?
Second.
Favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
All right. See you all. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
Hey, thank you. So have a good trip.
Wait till you talk. No, backing. Yeah, right? Other people. COVID.
Oh, yeah.
COVID. I always want to say like this, say, well, we don't see.
You too, don't work too hard. John, don't work too hard, right?
Bring,
Or maybe, I hope work picks up and you have to work too hard, right?